Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We're zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth on a great viewer question, and that is Peace and Harmony. How do I stop being a source of supply? How do I stop seeing life through the eyes of this individual who is perhaps manipulative, a narcissist, a psychopath, someone who has had an undue, negative, caustic, or toxic sort of bearing on you, which has caused your life course and your life journey to take a little bit of a skewed path where you just don't feel right, empowered, balanced, focused. And how do you stop being the source of supply? Well, you have to understand, as we were discussing in the previous video, a little bit more of the cause that's created this effect, looking back at where you had originally related to or resonated with this role of support only, and then how do you modify and adjust to get to where you want to be. So number one, you have to look at sort of what you might look at as one of the symptoms or ways of relating which are disempowering. And one of those, I would say, namely, is that of communicating in a sort of overwhelming or I don't want to say irrational way, but feeling the need that in order to get your point across, you have to over communicate. You have to be sort of overwhelmed in order, or super loud, or to get your point across, meaning that it's very difficult to feel that you don't have to regain ground, and to be able to communicate in a balanced, effective manner. I think that a lot of people, because they feel bottled up for a long period of time after they've been in this sort of supply role, that it's very difficult for them to own their reality, own their communication in a way that goes, hey, you know what, I'm no longer comfortable just, putting up and shutting up, that I want to be able to have some contribution. I want to be able to communicate and not get the look and not get a finger pointed at me or to be minimized. It's difficult to communicate from that point of view. Usually the point of view, once again, is coming from a state of overwhelm, a place of regret, a place of anger, and really, once again, not being able to communicate in a balanced manner. In other words, you're communicating in a way that's causing you alienation, or you're not able to get your point across in a manner that is well received. So you might look at needing to tone down or sort of shape your communication in a way that it will be well received, that you're not coming from a place of reactivity, once again, of overwhelm, that you have to shout it out, that you can't just come at it from a new angle. Begin to look at your tone and your emotional content when you're communicating, because if you're overwhelmed and sort of being angry at yourself from coming at this supportive role versus one of on the level or equality or sort of a wisdom, then realize that that's sort of the next step that you want to be able to present yourself, that you don't have to come at from a state of being intimidated, fearful, afraid of retribution, afraid of backlash, afraid of being laughed at. So take off that fear, take off that overwhelm, take off that fear, obligation, and guilt when it comes to communicating your feelings. Begin to get a little bit of practice, and with experience, repetition and experience, you'll be able to communicate in a way that is a little bit more composed, that has a sense of self-trust and a sense of self-knowing and wisdom. Back to Plato, know thyself. It's important to know that you don't need to be overwhelmed to communicate, especially, the first, second, or third time. It might be very overwhelming because you're used to seeing things through the eyes of another, or the eyes of someone who's been abusive or who's been minimizing or manipulative in that way. So you're used to taking the bait. You're used to feeling that you are, not as much as. But it doesn't mean you should define or identify with yourself in that way, because it's just hindering you. It's just keeping you down. It's keeping you disempowered. So begin to own your reality, own your feelings, own your opinion, and being able to come at events, situations where this person or other people who sort of trigger you in a similar manner, where you're saying, you know what, here comes the overwhelm. That's just an immature reaction. I don't need to be overwhelmed. I don't need to feel this inferiority complex. That's just me in a habitual manner that has been taught that, or I've learned to feel that. So let me now sort of unlearn and re-inform and re-educate myself that I don't need to sort of have the freak out, rebellious, or sort of that reactive communication style, that I can deliberately take responsibility and say, you know what? I want me to identify with feeling different. I want to identify with me feeling equal to. I want to identify with me feeling equal to the task. I want to identify with that versus the immature, feeling that you have been taught or picked up or learned or been programmed or sort of conditioned through maladaptive treatment of others to feel this way, and to say, that was then, this is now. I am me and I am free and I am enough. I have what it takes to feel equal to and to compose myself and to be able to communicate that and put some thought into it, so I can, again, pick my battles and choose. I do have an opportunity to have choice here in how I communicate my needs and identify with my needs and identify with my wants, rather than overindulging my fears. A lot of people who have been in a source of supply, they oftentimes have a difficulty owning their needs or owning their wants in a balanced way. So because their needs haven't been met, they over-identify with their wants, and they can't identify with their needs. And likewise, on the flip side, they're unidentified with their needs, and so overindulge a sort of needlessness. In other words, I'm not needy, but then they satisfy and sort of sublimate their needs in another way. So really look at your need to be communicated with in a manner of respect, and identify with that, and that it's okay to identify with those needs and to make sure that that happens. I need to be listened to. I need to be respected. I need to be acknowledged and validated, and that is not asking too much. So being able to swallow that value and to stick up and make sure and enforce that happens, you need to be able to create that barrier between yourself and another, and to erect a new communication style so you can communicate with a sort of boundary and then that standard, so you're feeling that you're hitting on the cylinders that are required, rather than feeling that you need to come at it from a reality of overwhelm. You can do this. You can do this. Begin to get an image and practice this with yourself so you're tempering sort of that lower impulsive nature, which of course has been hurt or feels upset or feels betrayed. Perhaps this person has lied to you, been deceitful, cheated on you. So of course your anger is warranted. Your anger is legitimate. Your anger is real, but you need to sort of shape and mold those feelings so you're not coming from that reactive place, even though it might be cathartic to yell, scream, jump up and down, point the finger, whatever it is. If you need to be able to communicate in a way that isn't overwhelmed or sort of laden with social anxiety, once again, if you're having that reactive hurt moment where your feelings are hurt, you're not feeling acknowledged and validated, perhaps this person is giving someone else the love, the pat on the back, having conversation, and they're not having a conversation with you, so you're sort of operating on that hypersensitivity. People who have been hurt before are specifically sensitive. When these situations come up, perhaps too sensitive. So look at that and saying, okay, I'm sensitive to this. Let me tone this down. I'm triggered by this. Let me identify that. That's my trigger. It's my sensitivity. Let me tone this down a little bit. Let me pick my battles. And let me, rather than reacting in that split millisecond, being able to pull back the reins and go, whoa, okay, I'm sensitive here. I'm being triggered. And let me acknowledge and validate that. Let me breathe through it. Let me calm myself down. Let me get relaxed. Do I really need to have a battle here? Do I really need to react out of overwhelm? Do I really need to react out of this sensitivity? Or can I take a look at this and perhaps is this, this overwhelmed reality? Am I being too sensitive? Am I being a little bit too emotional? Am I coming from that immature, triggered place? Can I take a step back, not react, in fact, to give yourself an out? Say, you know what? I could really point the finger now and react and feel hurt and, have hurt feelings and act, down and jealous, envious, what have you. And instead, rather than reacting that way, okay, so you know what? Let me give myself an out. Let me see how I feel about this in about an hour. And you'll be able to see, okay, maybe I was sort of overreacting or having that overwhelmed feeling of being triggered again. And I don't need to identify with that overwhelm as real. Even though I feel that way, I don't need to, I need to peel myself off the ceiling. Okay, you don't need to have that sort of, even though perhaps to protect and defend yourself in the past, you might needed to have pounced or be reactive or been that, reacting with that fervor and that strength and that being adamant and, but perhaps there's another way to cultivate and culture and condition and recondition yourself and reprogram yourself for the better way to communicate in a way that's of a more balanced reality, if that makes sense. Because I think that'll help you to get some distance and some, some space, some breathing room, and to hold that space for yourself rather than being reactive and overwhelming. And, let me see how I feel in an hour. Let me see how I feel about this tomorrow. Let me see how I feel about this in 2 days. And so I can perhaps craft my communication in a little bit different manner so I'm not pushing others away with overwhelm. I'm not pushing my own self away or down with emotional overwhelm or this anxiety or being constantly triggered because, a lot of people, if they've been a source of supply, they don't want this cycle to continue. They don't want the pattern to continue. So you want to be able to manage, control, and then eradicate or remove the trigger. So you need to practice. With repetition and experience, you will be able to reduce, minimize, and then eliminate that trigger so you're no longer, it's a learning process. It does take time. It takes these tools. It takes these resources. It takes this discussion and the privacy of these videos. It's what it's going to take. But if that's your goal, if that's your ideal to be sort of trigger free, then this will be a good tool in your toolbox to help manage that. If you can identify and resonate with this message, then I hope you identify and resonate with the tool in order to reduce that sort of overwhelmed, super anxious, reality of communicating that you've experienced. Begin to reduce the tension also in where you lock up your body. Do you lock up, the back of your shoulders? Do you carry it air? Are you armoring yourself? Are you, where are you holding that overwhelm? Begin to identify and sort of move into that space where you're always sort of clenching it, and unclench. Begin to breathe through the words, unclench, unclench, unclench. Okay, relax. Give yourself these commands. Usually before, if this has been an issue, it's because hitherto it was not safe for you to relax. It was not safe for you to be emotionally battered. It was not safe for you to be, emotionally tread upon, and, just to have that, being stampled, being, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of have being walked on, or having, a stampede over you, especially if it's a big number of people who you feel are grouped into this. So put a halt to that emotional stampede. Be like the Wonder Man or the Wonder Woman and just stop. Get a barrier between you and that overwhelm. Identify the cause that's created this effect, where you originally had to defend yourself and protect yourself through that, very strong reaction. And if you don't like being triggered, then begin to identify the trigger, identify the cause, what it feels like, what it's like for you personally. As an individual, you're not alone. Breathe through it. Unclench, relax, see how I feel about this in an hour. I'm not going to let myself have my feelings super hurt, and give yourself that out, and then see how you feel in an hour, in 1 day, in 2 days, and say, you know what? See how the overwhelm is not unnecessary, and begin to reprogram and recondition and re-identify and cultivate and shape your emotions rather than being controlled by them in a disempowering manner. You can do this. You will be empowered. It's a wonderful feeling. It's your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out. Have a beautiful day.